Hi everyone, I'm Jodi Barrows with The Square and a Square, and I just simply love to make quilt piecing easy, and I love for you to send me the emails with the pictures of the quilts that you're wanting to make, and then we'll break them down here in these live video sessions. The latest one that I received is this one right here that we call Broken Star. And the pattern that she has is actually this block, but it's put on point, so it has these extra triangles on the corner, and it has some applique in the corner. Now, you don't have to be afraid of the applique, the dreaded A word. We're going to be doing some videos that will show you exactly how simple and easy the applique is, but that's a future project. Today, we're just going to be working with the option for the half square triangles and this quilt, the Broken Star. So let's look at the pieces up here on the quilt, and then we'll move to the cutting table and we'll show you some tips and hints that will make this one simply a breeze. So obviously you have your square block, and you have these sashing pieces that separate the corner units. You can actually make those any size you want on the width to make your block larger and to tweak it a little bit to make it perfect to fit some project that you're working on that maybe has an odd size of block. But the main part of the block is really, really simple. It's just plain squares, a light and a dark, and two half square triangle units. Now we're going to get 4 half square triangle units out of one basic square. So you're going to be making 2 of these basic squares to get all of these half square triangle units. Now, I don't know about you, but it's much simpler to sew 2 of these together than it is to try to work with all of those triangle pieces and get them all to be the same size and shape and get them to go in your block beautifully. So let's come down. Oh, before we move to the cutting table, I want to talk a little bit about color, because I know color is something that people really struggle with. First of all, in color, there's light, medium, and dark. And the dark can be a dark dark or a light dark. The medium can be a light or a dark medium. And the light can be a light or a dark light. So you see there's 3 main shades, and within those shades you can have a light and a dark to them. Also, in the different ways that you put colors together, you may have that medium may show up as a darker, or that light may show up as a darker, depending on the different colors that you place it next to. So let's look at a couple of these up here. Obviously, the points here of the star are dark, but this background here is a medium, and it's a dark medium, but you have a good contrast, and it looks really well together. And that contrast is the important part. You think about on your blocks what you want to show up. Do you want the star to show up? Do you want these background pieces to show up? And so that's when you play with your fabric to see which one that's going to happen. Now in this one, this is a pretty good true medium here, or it could, well, actually I would say that it's a dark light. And this is a pretty good true medium here, but you get enough contrast that the block shows up nicely. And then in this one, it's a light with a dark. And it's fun to just go through here and look at how it's a very scrappy quilt, and I love scrappy quilts. They're my most favorite, but I like organized scrap quilts, and that's what this one is. So that means that all the background are the same within this block, and all of the star pieces are the same within that block, but each block may be different. That's an organized scrap. I'm not necessarily the type that, years ago when people were kind of getting back into doing scrap quilting. Of course, scrap quilting is really the way that quilts started. Hundreds of years ago, you just took your scraps and put them together. But when people were trying to get started with doing scraps and learning how to do them, they would say just put them all in a bag and pull one out and put it in the spot, and just pull another one out and put it in that spot. That's a little bit too unorganized for me. I like to kind of organize mine. I can visualize it in my head, and then it turns into what I call a really flavorful quilt with lots of different fabrics in them, but they're playing off of each other nicely, and the designs are actually showing up the way that you want them to to do. And then we did a dark sashing, which is really an old tradition. A lot of the times, like from the 30s up, the sashings became more light. We also used a cornerstone here in the sashing. And if you think about it, in the way that you put this together, you could get a secondary design right here in the quilt. If you did both of these squares dark, instead of putting a light in there, you would get an interaction of a little bit of a star design here. And I have one sewn up where we actually have put the two dark squares in there. And I don't know if you could see how this could become a secondary star in there. And it would be fun to play with it and see just exactly how your quilt would look with the fabrics that you're using. So once again, we're just going to have 2 triangle units here and 2 squares here. So this little shape will go here and see how it just turns, and here with your separating of your sashing, and that's your block. So let's come down here to the cutting table and let's look at some details that you might want to know, and then we're going to get into the trimming or the sewing. Today's quilt project you can find at squareandasquare.com broken star. And then we also have the pattern for the broken star, and there's actually 2 quilts in this pattern. The broken star is the one we're showing today, and it's here on the cover, and the union square is this one here on the back. And I love our patterns because you open them up and you get your square and a square information that you're going to need for those quilt projects. And then when you open it up again, you can get, for example, for the union square one, you get all your information of how to put it together. And then you're going to get 2 additional block sizes. And since this one is set on point, you're even going to get this information here about how to twist that block and put it on point. So you could also do that for your broken star units here. So here's your broken star quilt with all of your information, and the quilt uses an 8-inch, but you also have a 5, a 6, a 9, and a 12-inch block in your pattern. And also remember that you can reach us at squareandasquare.com. Join our Facebook page, and that's what you're on now, facebook.com, Square and a Square. Also, join our YouTube, youtube.com, Jodi Barrows, and you can email us the designs and the patterns that you want us to work on here in our live video sessions with Jodi at squareandasquare.com. Now, this is the pattern that our quilter sent in, and it didn't print off very well, but let's go ahead and look at the block in here. So let's just kind of pull it out and do it like this. Okay, so the block is actually put on point, and then it has these triangle units in here, and the applique is done on that. Now, anytime a block is put on point, it looks more difficult than what it really is. So let's turn it so that it's nice and square. So here you can see, and you have your dark square there. You have your light square, and then you just have your half square triangle units and some color in the middle. And of course that repeats in the corners. There you can see our star popping out. And those of you that are new to pattern adapting, hoping some of this, or even drawing up your own patterns, or how to look at quilts and dissect them and turn them into, now look, there it is. There's our block that we were looking at on the quilt behind me. So here you can see your 2 squares, and the only thing that's different is, once again, I used 2 dark instead of a dark and a light, and then your half square triangle units. And of course, keep them all the same color, or do some different things with your color and make them scrappy, as long as your contrast is good and your star will show up. Now also, and your reference book, the main books that we work with are the Square and a Square Volume 1 reference book. That's going to have your charts and your options in here. And on page 12 is a chart that I think is probably overlooked, and it's so cool and important. And this chart right here on page 12, it's showing you how to take a block and turn it on point and set it into your quilt. So this number here is the size of your quilt block. This number here would be the size of the square that you would cut into your triangle units. And this one here is the size of square you're going to cut for your triangle units. So this is a chart that is just kind of tucked away and hidden here on page 12 that will help you turn any block and put it on point and put it together. Then of course also on page 34, after your options, you're going to have 12 pages of charts which help you with any size of any of these different triangle units. If you're new to the square and a square system, then you know that everything we do starts out with a square in the middle, strips on the side, and the different ways you trim it up, you're going to get your different triangle units. So let's go ahead and look at option 4 and what we're going to need to make. So you would have 2 of these, and of course do your colors the way you want, and we're going to do the 2-step. See, here's the 90 where we push it right into the corner, and see those black lines go over the seam. That's your 1/4 of an inch, and they'll look like this when you get those trimmed up. And that would be like for an option 1, a square in a square. But anytime you come in here and start cutting it up to get your different shapes, and you're cutting through these corners, you have to do what we call the 2-step, because I'm stepping over 2 more lines, and I'm putting the tip of the square right in the tip of the line right in the tip of the square, black line over your seam, and grid line through the point. And remember, you can start with any of the 4 corners. Start with the best one. So if this first one isn't lining up the way you want, just turn it to another one and start with the best corner, because once you start, see there's no white over here, and see that's a really nice sharp point. Because once you start trimming, you want to keep your block square with this outside edge where you've already cut. So I'm putting my 2-step in there, lining it up the best I can, and then I come out here to see where I've already cut. And I want to make sure that fabric underneath is looking nice and straight with the grid lines on the ruler. We want to keep everything parallel and nice and straight. So put your 90 in there, step it over 2. Check your outside edges here. Now we have 2 to look at, and keep it just as nice and square and trim and neat as possible. Do it to the last. 90 goes in there, step it over 2. Check your outside edges. Okay, so now I'm just going to go right through these sharp corners and go the opposite direction. And look how this is going to give me 4 half square triangles just like that. So by the time I do that for 2, I have enough for 1 whole block. So you're just going to put together, and you would put a dark and a light, a dark and a light. All of the 4 corners are going to be made the same. Now, I like to cut my squares that I'm going to sew here and here a little bit larger, because we all have what we call the PPMs, the personal private measurements, and that's all going to affect how well all 4 of these sew together. So if you cut this perfectly to fit, you're not going to have any room to square your block up perfectly like you see here in this one. So cut them a little bit larger. And then, of course, you'll sew them together, matching that corner point. These outside edges, you'll just trim off whenever you get the 4 together. And I love in our mini square and a square ruler, this extra little square corner here allows you to come in here and just square up so you can see, okay, here's my 3-inch. I can trim off whatever I want, flip it to the other side, trim up the other 2, and it's just that easy to get your units together, and then 4 of these would come together. Now I also want to talk about the 4-patch pop, because when you do the 4-patch pop, you're going to allow all of these pieces here on the back to lay down nice and flat, so you don't have that tight knot here of all these fabrics going together. So this was my last seam here, and I just give it a little twist and see how that opens that up. You can see that tiny little 4-patch right there, and you don't have all of these fabrics laying here like this, adding that knot. So I actually have 3 layers of fabric right here. So if it went like this would actually give me 6 or more layers of fabric here, making that quite a knot in your quilt. So let's look. Anytime you have a seam coming together where you have 4 units. You can do that 4-patch pop. So I'm going to bring it up here a little closer to the camera. So this is my last seam right here. So I'm just going to grab it, and I just kind of do a little twist, and it just kind of pops. It just kind of pops that open. And you see the pretty color of the good fabric right there, making that little 4-patch. And then when I press it, see, it goes that way. And the seams kind of make that little pinwheel design all turning like this. And you get that nice little 4-patch pop right there. So go to your last seam, grab it firmly right here, and just give it a little twist. And that will just pop open. And that's what we call the 4-patch pop. So anytime you have any questions or you need any help with any of your square and square information or putting any quilt together, just send us an email, snap us a picture of what you're looking at, and we'll be happy to add it to our live videos. So let's see, do we have any specific questions today? Let's see what we've got. She says, I like this pattern. Do we need to get the book? You can use your square and a square ruler and have everything that you need right here in your Broken Star pattern. And you can do the pattern as an e-pattern and print it, or you can buy it and we'll ship it to you just like that. And you don't have to have the reference books to make what I've shown you today, but we really do feel like that the Square and a Square Volume 1 reference book just adds so much value to your ruler, and it helps you build. If you'll go back and look on our live videos, I'm always referring to this book and showing you the charts and the different quilts that are in here and the multiple block sizes. And your shipping really doesn't change. So to me, if you're ordering the ruler, you need to just go ahead and order the reference book because you're going to want it at one time or another. So let me see if I can find our questions again. The ruler that I'm using is the Square and a Square ruler, and that's the ruler we use for everything. This is the large original one, and this is the mini Square and a Square. Both of them will make everything that I show you on all of these different videos. We do have some diamond units, which we haven't highlighted too much in these weeks of videos, and we do have a volume 2 of the diamond books. All of the quilts I make use the Square ruler, and that's the ruler I have used for over 30 years. One ruler makes everything. One ruler makes every triangle unit, and it makes every unit any size that you want. And seldom do I ever see a quilt that we cannot adapt and turn into the Square and a Square system. And what the Square and a Square system does, if you're new to this, is it helps remove the human element. The Square and Square system is the only system in the quilt world that helps remove the imperfection of the human, of the cutting, the sewing, and the pressing. We do all of that work right here, and then we come in and do the Square and a Square system, and that's where the magic is at, to give you these perfect shapes and these perfect sizes that go in and make all of these beautiful quilts. We make everything so fast and so easy and so simple, you just won't believe it until you experience and see it with your own very eyes. So I'm Jodi Barrows with the Square and a Square. We've been working on the Broken Star today. Make sure you set your notifications so you won't miss a single one of these, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.